Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're watching this late at night, maybe you've just finished binge watching Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 1, and your mind is racing with theories, questions and emotions about what just happened in that incredible fourth episode ending. Or maybe you're just looking for something calm and comprehensive to fall asleep to while we explore every detail of this monumental chapter in the Stranger Things saga. This video is designed to be thorough, relaxing and informative. We're going to break down absolutely everything that happened in Volume 1's ending, analyse the implications for Volume 2, discuss character arcs, explore the mythology, and really dive deep into what the Duffer Brothers are setting up for the final showdown with Vecna. We'll take our time with this, moving through each element carefully and thoughtfully, giving you space to process the information or simply drift off into peaceful sleep while my voice guides you through the analysis. So get comfortable, adjust your volume to something peaceful, maybe dim your lights, and let's begin our journey back to Hawkins, Indiana. In the fall of 1987, where our heroes face their darkest hour yet. This is going to be a long, comprehensive exploration, so there's no rush. We have all the time we need to examine every detail, every character moment, every plot thread that the Duffer Brothers have woven together. Before we dive in, if you enjoy detailed analysis videos like this that you can relax to, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. And if you find yourself drifting off during this video, that's absolutely perfect. That's exactly what this is designed for. You can always come back and rewatch tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever you need a calming deep dive into the world of Stranger Things. Now, let's talk about Stranger Things. Season 5, Volume 1. Let's explore the ending that has everyone talking, theorizing, and feeling all the emotions. Let's break down what happened, why it matters, and where we're headed as we move into the final chapters of this incredible story. To fully appreciate where Volume 1 leaves us, we need to take our time and really understand where we started. Season 5 picks up in the fall of 1987, several months after the catastrophic events that concluded Season 4. Hawkins has been irrevocably transformed by the opening of the rifts, those massive tears in reality that Vecna created when he completed his 4 kills at the end of the previous season. The small Indiana town that we first met back in 1983 is now something entirely different, something darker and more dangerous. The gates to the Upside Down haven't just opened, they've essentially begun merging the two dimensions in catastrophic and unprecedented ways. What started as small incursions and isolated incidents has escalated into a full-scale dimensional overlap. Parts of Hawkins now exist simultaneously in both our world and the Upside Down, creating zones of reality that are unstable, dangerous, and utterly alien to anything humanity has experienced before. The town is under military quarantine, which means that walls have been erected, checkpoints established, and armed soldiers patrol the streets 24 hours a day. The official story, as presented by the government and disseminated through carefully controlled media channels, is that Hawkins experienced a catastrophic earthquake followed by environmental contamination. The truth, of course, is far stranger and more terrifying, but the government has intensified its hunt for Eleven, publicly blaming her for the destruction and painting her as a terrorist or a weapon of mass destruction that must be contained. This forces our heroes into a desperate situation from the very beginning of Volume 1. They're not just fighting interdimensional monsters anymore. They're also evading capture by their own government, living as fugitives in the very town they've saved multiple times. The irony isn't lost on them, and there are several poignant moments throughout Volume 1 where characters reflect on the injustice of being hunted by the people they've protected. Volume 1 consisted of 4 episodes, each one building carefully upon the last. The Crawl, The Vanishing of, The Turnbow Trap, and Sorcerer. These titles were carefully chosen as the Duffer Brothers always choose their episode titles with deliberate meaning. Each episode served a specific purpose in the overall architecture of the season, slowly ratcheting up tension while deepening character relationships and expanding the mythology of the Upside Down in ways we've never seen before. Episode 1, The Crawl, opened with an absolutely haunting cold open that set the tone for everything that followed. We saw the aftermath of the rifts in detail, not just the physical damage to buildings and infrastructure, but the psychological toll on the citizens of Hawkins. People are traumatized, living in fear, uncertain whether their homes will be swallowed by the spreading corruption. The military has established checkpoints throughout the town, creating a police state atmosphere that feels oppressive and claustrophobic. The episode's title refers to both the literal crawling movement of the Upside Down's influence spreading through Hawkins like a disease or infection, and metaphorically to our hero's slow, methodical approach to finding Vecna, who has mysteriously vanished from any location they can detect. It's also a reference to the feeling of dread that crawls up your spine when you know something terrible is coming, but you can't see it yet. The pacing of this episode was deliberately slow, allowing us to sit with the characters in their fear and uncertainty. The episode established very clearly that our core group, 11, Mike, Will, Lucas, Dustin, Max, Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Robin, Joyce, and Hopper, are all united with a single goal: find and kill Vecna before he can complete whatever horrifying plan he has for Hawkins and potentially the entire world. But Vecna's whereabouts remain completely unknown, and his plans are shrouded in mystery. He's not in the Upside Down where they expect him to be. He's not in any of his previous haunts. It's as if he's completely vanished, which makes him even more terrifying because they know he's out there somewhere, planning, preparing, growing stronger. We also met several new characters in this volume, most notably Dr. K, played brilliantly by Linda Hamilton in a performance that brings gravitas and complexity to what could have been a one-dimensional military antagonist. Dr. K is the leader of the military operation in Hawkins, answering directly to someone high up in the Department of Defense. From her first scene, it's clear she has her own agenda and her own understanding of what's happening, even if that understanding is incomplete and dangerously flawed. She's not a simple antagonist. Her character has genuine depth and layers. She genuinely believes she's trying to protect people, trying to contain a threat before it spreads beyond Hawkins. Her methods are harsh, authoritarian, and sometimes cruel, but they come from a place of sincere conviction that she's doing the right thing. This moral complexity makes her a far more interesting character than a simple villain would be. Throughout Volume 1, we see glimpses of doubt in her eyes, moments where she questions whether her approach is correct, whether there might be alternatives she hasn't considered. Episode 2, The Vanishing of, delivered on its mysterious and deliberately incomplete title in ways that were both shocking and emotionally devastating. Without spoiling every detail for those who might still be catching up, this episode featured a disappearance that mirrors Will's original vanishing from Season 1, but with even more devastating implications and consequences. The parallel structure was absolutely intentional, reminding us that this entire story began with a child disappearing into the Upside Down, and now, as we approach the end of the saga, history is repeating itself in twisted and darker ways. The cold open for this episode was, as Ross Duffer promised in interviews leading up to the season, absolutely insane in the best possible way. It featured a sequence that fundamentally changed our understanding of what Vecna is capable of, expanding his powers beyond what we thought possible. The sequence introduced elements of time manipulation that we hadn't fully grasped before. The ability to not just trap people in memories, but to actually affect the flow of time in localized areas, creating pockets where hours pass in seconds, or seconds stretch into hours. The horror of watching events unfold while our characters remain powerless to stop them was genuinely gut-wrenching. There's a scene where Mike is desperately trying to reach someone before Vecna does, and we watch him running in real time while the person he's trying to save experiences time at a different rate. By the time Mike arrives, hours have passed for the victim, but only minutes for Mike. This temporal distortion adds a new layer of horror to Vecna's already terrifying power set. Episode 3, The Turnbow Trap, centered around the Turnbow Land Development and Realty Company, which we learned has deep and disturbing connections to Hawkins' history and to the original experiments that created the gate to the Upside Down. This episode was heavy on exposition, but in the best way possible. It filled in crucial gaps in our understanding of Hawkins' founding, the government's involvement dating back much further than we knew, and why this specific location has always been a thin point between dimensions. The episode revealed that the Turnbow family, who founded Hawkins and owned most of the land, were aware of the area's strange properties. They experienced unexplained phenomena, disappearances, and strange occurrences throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. The family kept detailed records hidden away in private archives that documented these events. When the government began looking for a location to conduct their experiments in the 1950s, they specifically sought out areas with histories of paranormal activity, and Hawkins' documented strangeness made it a perfect candidate. The episode also featured some of the season's most beautiful and touching character moments. We saw Mike stepping into a leadership role that felt completely earned and natural, not forced or artificial. His growth from the insecure kid of Season 1 to the confident young man of Season 5 has been gradual and believable. We watched Will grappling with his connection to the Upside Down and to Vecna in ways that were both heartbreaking and essential to the plot. Will's trauma and his ongoing struggle to feel normal, to feel like he belongs, continues to be one of the series' most poignant elements, and we witness Max's continued struggle with the after effects of Vecna's attack on her mind, even as she bravely pushes forward to help her friends. Max is physically healed from the injuries she sustained at the end of Season 4, but the psychological scars run deep. She has nightmares every night. She sees Vecna in shadows and reflections. She flinches at sudden noises. Her relationship with Lucas has become both her anchor and her source of guilt. She loves him desperately, but feels she's a burden to him, that she's broken in ways that can't be fixed. Which brings us to Episode 4, Sorcerer, and the ending that we're here to discuss in exhaustive depth and detail. Sorcerer is the longest episode of Volume 1, clocking in at approximately 83 minutes of runtime, and every single minute of that runtime is essential to the story being told. There's no filler, no wasted moments. The title references both Dungeons and Dragons lore, specifically the Sorcerer class that uses innate magical abilities rather than learned spells, drawing power from within rather than from external sources, and Eleven's powers, which have always been portrayed as natural, instinctive, and connected to something deeper than mere scientific training. The episode opens with our core group splitting up into multiple teams, each pursuing different leads on Vecna's location and his plans. This structure allows the Duffer Brothers to service multiple storylines simultaneously, giving each character their moment to shine while building toward the convergence that happens in the episode's final act. The intercutting between storylines is masterful, creating tension through juxtaposition and allowing thematic parallels to emerge naturally. Team 1 consists of 11, Hopper, and Joyce. This is essentially the Byers-Hopper family unit, bound together by love and shared trauma. They're investigating a series of strange occurrences in the quarantine zone, reports of people hearing voices that aren't there, seeing visions of loved ones who are dead or absent, experiencing lost time where they can't account for hours or even days. The reports are consistent enough to suggest a pattern, something deliberate rather than random. 11 suspects these are echoes of Vecna's consciousness, residual psychic impressions he's left behind as he moves through the rifts and the overlapping spaces between dimensions. It's like psychic fingerprints, traces of his presence that linger even after he's physically departed. Hopper is protective, almost overbearingly so, which creates tension between him and 11. He's nearly lost her multiple times, and the thought of losing her again, of her sacrificing herself to stop Vecna, is something he can barely contemplate. Joyce serves as the emotional anchor for both of them, reminding them of what they're fighting for. She's the heart of this particular group, the one who can mediate between Hopper's overprotectiveness and Eleven's determination to do whatever is necessary. Joyce has always been the character who refuses to give up, who keeps fighting even when everyone tells her she's wrong or crazy. Her resilience is legendary, and in this episode, we see how that resilience has become the foundation on which others build their own courage. Their investigation leads them to an abandoned section of Hawkins that's been almost completely overtaken by the Upside Down's influence. The set design here is absolutely spectacular, a stunning achievement in production design that deserves to be studied and celebrated. We see familiar locations from previous seasons, the library, the community centre, even Melvald's general store, where Joyce used to work, now corrupted and twisted beyond recognition. The buildings are partially phased into the Upside Down's version of reality, creating impossible geometries and surfaces that seem to shift when you are not looking directly at them. The colour palette in these scenes is remarkable. Instead of the usual stark contrast between the normal world's warm tones and the Upside Down's cold blues and greys, we get a sickly blending of both, creating colours that don't exist in nature, purples that hurt to look at, greens that seem to pulse with nausea-inducing frequency, reds that are simultaneously too bright and too dark. It's visually unsettling in exactly the way it should be, creating a sense of wrongness that operates on a gut level before your conscious mind can even process what's wrong. They discover that Vecna hasn't vanished at all. Instead, he's been building something, constructing a structure within the Upside Down that defies conventional physics and logic. It's not just a building or a lair, it's something far more complex and disturbing. The structure seems to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, or perhaps it exists outside of space entirely, and what they're seeing is merely a projection or shadow of something larger. The architecture is organic and mechanical at once, grown and built, alive and dead. Team 2 is Mike, Will, Lucas and Dustin, the original party, back together and operating as a unit. Their chemistry is everything fans could hope for and more. After seasons of being separated or having their friendship tested by distance and circumstance, seeing them work together with the intuitive understanding that comes from years of shared experience is deeply satisfying. The episode makes time for quiet moments where they discuss their fears, their regrets, and their determination to end this nightmare together, no matter what it costs them personally. Will, in particular, has some of his most powerful and emotionally resonant scenes of the entire series in this episode. His connection to the Upside Down, established all the way back in Season 1 when he was trapped there for a week, has never truly been severed. We learned in Season 2 that the Mind Flayer possessed him, using him as a spy. Even after the possession was broken, Will has maintained a sensitivity to the Upside Down, an ability to sense when it's near, when gates are opening, when danger is approaching. But in this episode, Will reveals something he's been keeping secret, something he's been afraid to share because he fears it makes him a liability, a danger to his friends. He can sense Vecna's emotions, his thoughts, his intentions. It's not full-blown possession like what happened in Season 2, but rather a psychic link that goes both ways, a connection that can't be broken or blocked. Vecna has been aware of Will's presence in his mind, and he's been using Will to track the group's movements, to anticipate their strategies, to stay one step ahead of them. This revelation absolutely devastates Will. He feels that he's betrayed his friends, that he's been an unwitting spy for the enemy, that everything bad that's happened is somehow his fault for not realising the connection existed or not being strong enough to break it. The guilt and self-loathing that pours out of him in the scene where he confesses is heartbreaking. Noah Schnapp delivers a performance of such raw vulnerability that it's almost painful to watch. But Mike refuses to let Will spiral into self-blame and despair. The speech Mike gives about how Will is the heart of the party, how his sensitivity and compassion are strengths rather than weaknesses, how his ability to feel deeply and connect with others is exactly what makes him valuable and essential, is genuinely moving and represents the culmination of Mike's character arc. Mike has always been somewhat emotionally inarticulate, struggling to express his feelings even when they are overwhelming, but here, when Will needs him most, Mike finds the words. He tells Will that the connection to Vecna isn't a weakness, it's a weapon they can use. The boys quickly realise they can use Will's connection as a tactical advantage. If Will can sense Vecna, if the link goes both ways, then perhaps they can use him to locate Vecna's exact position and coordinate a precise attack. It's incredibly dangerous. Opening himself up fully to that connection could allow Vecna to take control, to possess Will again or worse. But Will volunteers without hesitation, determined to turn his greatest vulnerability into his greatest contribution. Lucas and Dustin immediately begin working on creating a kind of psychic dampener or circuit breaker, using Eleven's understanding of how her powers work on a neurological and psychic level, combined with Dustin's technical expertise in electronics and engineering, and Lucas's strategic thinking and ability to synthesize information from multiple sources. They theorize that if they can create a device that disrupts psychic frequencies, They might be able to give Will an emergency escape route if Vecna tries to take control. The science is fictional, obviously, but it's presented in a way that feels internally consistent with the show's established rules. They're not just making up nonsense, they're building on concepts that have been developed throughout the series, extending the logic in new directions. It's the kind of creative problem solving that has always been at the heart of Stranger Things. The idea that smart kids with limited resources can still find ways to fight back against overwhelming threats. Team 3 is Nancy, Steve, Jonathan, and Robin. They're researching the history of Hawkins more deeply than anyone has before, working at the library and community archives, interviewing elderly survivors who remember the town's early days, trying to find patterns in Vecna's behaviour that might reveal his ultimate endgame. Nancy is in full investigative journalist mode, the role she's been preparing for her entire life without quite realising it. Her ability to connect dots that others have missed, to see the patterns hidden in seemingly unrelated data, is showcased beautifully here. Steve is struggling with existential questions that he's never really confronted before. Throughout the series, Steve has evolved from a shallow popular kid into a genuinely good person, someone who's brave and loyal and protective, but he's never really thought about what comes after high school, after Hawkins, after this fight is over. And increasingly, he's confronting the knowledge that this might be their last mission together, that some of them might not survive, and that he needs to make peace with his mortality and find meaning in sacrifice if that's what's required. His character arc this volume is subtle but profound. We see him having quiet conversations with Robin about legacy, about what it means to live a good life, about whether dying to protect others is noble or tragic, or both. Robin, with her characteristic blend of humour and insight, helps him work through these feelings. She tells him that meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create through your choices and actions. And Steve's choices, consistently, have been to protect people, to put himself in danger so others don't have to be. That's meaningful. That matters. Jonathan and Nancy's relationship is in a complicated, messy place, and the show doesn't shy away from that complexity. They love each other. That's not in question. But the distance, both physical and emotional, has taken its toll. Jonathan spent time in California while Nancy remained in Hawkins. They've both changed, grown in different directions, wanted different things. Jonathan is dealing with guilt over not being there when Nancy needed him most, over feeling like he failed her by not being present during the most traumatic events of Season 4. Nancy is trying to balance her feelings for both Jonathan and Steve, trying to figure out what she wants for her future, trying to reconcile her ambitions with her relationships. The love triangle could have been played for cheap drama, but instead, it's handled with maturity and genuine emotion. All three of them, Nancy, Steve, and Jonathan, acknowledge that their feelings are complex and messy, that there are no easy answers, and that ultimately, stopping Vecna and saving the world is more important than resolving their romantic entanglements. The relationships matter, deeply, but they can't be the priority right now. Their research uncovers something genuinely disturbing that reframes our understanding of Hawkins and its significance. Vecna's obsession with this specific town isn't random or coincidental. Hawkins sits on a geographical and mystical convergence point, a place where the boundaries between dimensions are naturally thin. Throughout history, going back centuries before the town was even founded, there have been disappearances, strange occurrences, and unexplained phenomena in this area. Victor Creel's murders in the 1950s, which we learned about in Season 4, were just one chapter in a much longer and darker story. The town's history is full of gaps and mysteries, people who vanished without a trace, animals found dead with no apparent cause, witnesses who reported seeing impossible things. Most of these incidents were dismissed as superstition, accidents, or natural phenomena. But taken together, they form a clear pattern of supernatural activity stretching back to before European colonisation. Nancy discovers records of an indigenous settlement that existed on this land centuries ago, long before white settlers arrived and displaced the native peoples. The tribe that lived here, the Duffer Brothers, worked with indigenous consultants to create a respectful and accurate representation, recognized this place as sacred and dangerous, a spot where the veil between the living world and the spirit world was thin and permeable. They performed regular rituals to keep malevolent entities at bay, to maintain the boundary between worlds, to protect both the spirits and the living from inadvertent crossover. When European settlers arrived in the early 1800s and forcibly displaced the indigenous population through violence and disease, those protective rituals ended. The knowledge was lost, dismissed as primitive superstition by the colonizers who had no framework for understanding what the indigenous people had been doing or why it mattered. The land sat dormant for generations, still thin, still dangerous, but without active supernatural incursions because there was nothing to tear through the weakened but intact barrier. Then, in the 1950s, the government began its experiments. They were looking for locations with documented paranormal activity, places where the normal rules of physics seemed to bend or break. They found Hawkins in their research, noted its history of strangeness, and decided it was perfect for their purposes. When they began their experiments, trying to access other dimensions, trying to develop psychic weapons and powers, they unwittingly tore open what should have remained sealed. They broke through the barrier that the indigenous rituals had maintained, and everything that followed, the Upside Down, the Demogorgon, the Mind Flayer, Vecna, all of it flows from that original sin of colonial violence and ignorant hubris. This historical context reframes the entire series in fascinating ways. Hawkins isn't special because of what the government did. The government chose Hawkins because it was already special, already a thin place, already dangerous. Vecna, or rather Henry Creel, before his transformation, was drawn to Hawkins because he sensed this power, this thinness between worlds. His family moved to Hawkins when he was a child, not by coincidence, but by an unconscious attraction to a place where someone with his emerging powers could thrive and grow stronger. Vecna is trying to finish what ancient forces once attempted, to break through completely and merge the dimensions permanently, creating a new reality where the boundaries between life and death, mind and matter, dream and waking are dissolved. In this new reality, Vecna would reign as a god-like entity, feeding on the suffering and death of all consciousness for eternity, growing stronger with each soul consumed, eventually expanding his domain beyond Earth to encompass all of existence. All three teams' separate investigations lead them, through different paths and different reasoning, to the same location, the original site of Hawkins National Laboratory, or rather, what remains of it after the events of previous seasons. The lab has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times throughout the series, and now it exists as ruins, a bombed-out shell of its former self. But the lab sits at the epicenter of the main rift, the largest and most stable tear between dimensions, and beneath it, in the ruins of the underground facility that once housed 11 and the other test subjects, Vecna has been constructing his endgame. The convergence of our heroes at this location is masterfully edited, cutting between the three teams as they approach from different directions, each realizing simultaneously through different pieces of evidence that this is where they need to be. The score swells dramatically, combining all the musical themes from previous seasons, the kids' adventure theme, Eleven's emotional motif, the Upside Down's horror strings, the synthesizer melody that represents Hawkins itself, into a single, powerful musical statement that represents the culmination of 8 years of storytelling. When they finally reunite in the ruins outside the lab, there's a moment of pure relief and joy that cuts through all the tension and fear. They embrace, they share information rapidly, they strategize and plan. Despite everything they've been through, despite all the trauma and loss, there's genuine happiness in being together again, in knowing they're facing this final challenge as a united front. The found family dynamic that has always been central to Stranger Things is on full display here, and it's beautiful. 11 reaches out with her powers, extending her consciousness into the earth beneath them, sensing the twisted architecture of the Upside Down that exists beneath Hawkins like a mirror image or a shadow. She senses Vecna below them, deep in the ruins, waiting with a patience that feels almost divine. He's not hiding. He's not trying to evade them. He wants them to come. He's prepared for their arrival. This is a trap, and they all know it's a trap, but it's a trap they have to spring because there's no other option left to them. If they don't confront Vecna now, if they retreat or try to find another way, he'll complete his ritual on his own timetable. The window for intervention is closing rapidly. Every hour that passes, his power grows. Every moment they delay, more people die or disappear. They don't have the luxury of perfect planning or ideal conditions. They have to act now with what they have or lose everything. Dr. K and her military forces arrive, surrounding the area with soldiers, vehicles, and weapons. They've been tracking the group's movements using all the surveillance technology available to the US military in the late 1980s. There's a tense standoff where soldiers train their weapons on our heroes, where Dr. K steps forward and demands that 11 surrender herself for the safety of the town and the nation. Hopper steps forward, and in one of David Harbour's finest moments of the entire series, delivers a speech that's both a condemnation and a plea. He talks about government overreach, about how the real danger has always been unchecked authority masquerading as protection. He details how the government created this entire situation through its unethical experiments, how they kidnapped children and tortured them in pursuit of power, how they've repeatedly lied to and endangered the citizens they claim to protect. He points out that these kids, these teenagers that Dr. K wants to treat as threats, have saved the world multiple times, while adults failed or actively made things worse. Adults opened the gate. Adults created the experiments that gave Vecna his powers. Adults made every decision that led to this moment, and now adults want to blame children for the consequences and take away their agency to fix what adults broke. It's a powerful speech, delivered with conviction and anger and a deep weariness that comes from years of seeing systems fail the people they're supposed to serve. Hopper has been a cop, a soldier, a father, a prisoner. He's seen authority from every angle, and he knows that blind faith in institutions is naive and dangerous. Dr. K isn't immediately swayed by rhetoric. She's a military officer, trained to follow orders and maintain control. She orders her troops to take 11 by force, to restrain the others if they resist. The soldiers raise their weapons, fingers on triggers, safety's off. For a moment, it seems like the showdown will turn into a bloodbath, our heroes fighting not just Vecna, but their own government. But something unexpected happens, something that speaks to the power of story and witness. The soldiers refuse to follow orders. One by one, they lower their weapons. These aren't faceless government goons or automatons following programming. They're people from Hawkins and the surrounding areas, people who have families and friends here. They've seen what these kids have done. They've heard the stories. More importantly, they've seen the upside down with their own eyes. They've watched creatures emerge from the rifts. They've lost friends and colleagues to monsters. They understand, in a way their commanders back in Washington don't, that conventional military force isn't going to stop what's coming. One soldier, a young man probably not much older than Steve, speaks up. He says he has a little sister who looks up to 11, who sees her as a hero. He can't, in good conscience, arrest someone who's trying to save his sister's life. Another soldier echoes the sentiment, then another. The mutiny spreads through the ranks rapidly. These are good people who've been following bad orders, and when confronted with the reality of what they are being asked to do, they choose humanity over hierarchy. Dr. K is left standing alone, and Linda Hamilton plays this moment with incredible subtlety and nuance. You see the realization cross her face that she's lost control, that her certainty about what's right has blinded her to the reality of the situation. Her worldview, built on military discipline and governmental authority, is crumbling. She doesn't become an ally immediately. That would be too easy, too unrealistic. But she backs down, ordering her troops to stand aside, giving our heroes the space they need to do what must be done. It's not redemption yet, but it's the beginning of understanding. This is when Will's plan goes into effect. He sits down right there in the ruins, Mike and Lucas beside him for support, Dustin monitoring readings on hastily assembled equipment. Will closes his eyes and deliberately opens himself fully to the psychic connection with Vecna, removing all his mental barriers and defences, allowing the entity to see through his eyes, to feel through his senses, to access his thoughts and memories. It's agonising to watch. Noah Schnapp's performance is raw and visceral, his body contorting as Will fights to maintain his sense of self while Vecna's consciousness invades his mind like poison or disease spreading through his nervous system. Will's nose bleeds. He gasps for air that won't fill his lungs. His hands claw at the ground, fingers digging into dirt and concrete. Mike holds him, telling him he's strong. He can do this. He's not alone. Lucas monitors his vital signs, ready to pull him back if his heart stops or his brain activity becomes dangerous. But this is the misdirection, the trick they're playing on an entity that thinks itself omniscient. While Vecna focuses all his attention on Will, on flooding the connection with his consciousness and asserting dominance over the psychic link, 11 uses the connection as a back door, a secret path into enemy territory. She piggybacks on Will's link, following it like a thread through a labyrinth, using Will as an anchor and a guide, while she sends her consciousness into the depths of Vecna's mind and the Upside Down. It's a brilliant gambit, using their greatest vulnerability as their greatest weapon. Vecna expects them to be afraid of the connection, to try to break it or block it. He doesn't expect them to weaponize it, to use it as an infiltration route. By the time he realizes what's happening, 11 is already deep in his psychic space, following the connection back to its source, tracking him to his physical location. 11 finds him. She sees where he is, what he's doing, what he's building, and what she sees terrifies her so deeply that she breaks the connection immediately, yanking herself and Will back to safety with a psychic violence that leaves them both gasping and disoriented. When she opens her eyes, tears are streaming down her face, mixing with the blood from her nose. Her whole body is shaking. Mike rushes to her side, asking what she saw, what's wrong, what did Vecna show her? 11 can barely speak. Her voice is a whisper, hoarse and broken. She just repeats one phrase over and over. We're too late, we're too late, we're too late. The dread that settles over the group is palpable. If 11, who has faced down every horror the Upside Down has thrown at them, who has stared death in the face multiple times, is this frightened? Then what they're about to face must be beyond anything they've encountered before. But despite the fear, despite the despair, there's no real choice. They came here to stop Vecna. Whether they're too late or not, they have to try. Giving up isn't an option. It never has been. Despite 11's despair and her conviction that they've already failed, there's no choice but to move forward. They can't turn back now, not when they're this close, not when the stakes are this high. They gear up with whatever weapons and equipment they can scavenge from the ruins and from the military supplies that the now sympathetic soldiers provide. It's a strange arsenal, a mix of improvised weapons and military hardware, reflecting the strange alliance between teenagers and soldiers united against an impossible threat. Steve's iconic nail bat makes its return, now reinforced with additional nails and metal bands, a weapon that's seen him through countless battles. Nancy checks and rechecks her shotgun, the weapon she's become expert with, loading shells with steady hands, despite the tremor of fear that runs through her. Jonathan has fashioned Molotov cocktails, remembering how fire has been effective against upside-down creatures in the past. Lucas has his slingshot and wrist rocket, now upgraded with explosive ammunition that Dustin helped him engineer. Dustin has built communication devices that should work even across dimensional barriers, using principles he's developed from studying the Upside Down's properties. Max, still recovering from her ordeal at the end of Season 4, insists on coming with them despite everyone's protests. She's physically healed, but the psychological trauma lingers. Still, she refuses to be left behind, refuses to let Vecna win by making her live in fear. Erica, Lucas's younger sister, who has proven herself brave and resourceful time and again, also refuses to stay back. She's earned her place in this fight. The entire group, and it's a large group at this point, including several of the reformed soldiers who have decided to help, and even, reluctantly, Dr. K herself, who has begun to understand that her military training didn't prepare her for this, prepares to enter the Upside Down through the main rift. The visual of them standing at the edge of the massive tear in reality, lit by the eerie red lightning that flashes constantly from the other side, is iconic and will undoubtedly become one of the most memorable and reproduced images of the entire series. It's a shot that feels both epic and intimate, showing these ordinary people about to step into hell itself to fight for everything they love. They step through together, holding hands, supporting each other. The sensation of crossing the dimensional boundary is described by characters as feeling like being submerged in ice water and fire simultaneously, like having every nerve in your body activated at once. It's not painless, crossing between worlds, but they've done it before, and they can endure it again. On the other side, they emerge into the upside down, and immediately they can see that it's changed significantly since they were last here. The upside down has always been portrayed as a dark, twisted mirror of our world, frozen in time at the moment the first gate opened. But now it's more aggressive, more alive, more actively hostile. The vines that cover every surface pulse with bioluminescent light, creating patterns that seem almost like neural networks or circulatory systems. The vines move and writhe even when no one touches them, reaching toward the intruders like the tentacles of some vast organism that's become aware of foreign bodies. In its system, the sky roils with storms that seem to respond to emotion and thought. When someone in the group feels fear, the lightning intensifies. When someone feels anger, the thunder grows louder. It's as if the Upside Down itself has developed a primitive consciousness, or perhaps Vecna's growing power has allowed him to merge with the dimension itself, making the entire realm an extension of his will and awareness. The very air feels thick with dread, heavy and hard to breathe, requiring effort to pull into lungs that don't want to accept it. The spores that drift through it glow with an inner light, sometimes blue, sometimes green, sometimes red, creating an unsettling beauty amidst the horror. It's like being inside a nightmare that someone has carefully art directed, where even the aesthetics are designed to disturb and disorient. They navigate through the twisted mirror version of Hawkins, heading toward the lab's location. The journey is treacherous. The ground is uneven, covered in the same organic vine material that coats everything else. Walking is difficult because the surface shifts and moves beneath their feet. Buildings loom in the darkness, familiar structures rendered alien and wrong. The school, the video store, the Wheeler house, all of them present but corrupted, like memories that have been degraded and distorted over time. Along the way, they're attacked by creatures they've never seen before, not demogorgons or demobats, but entirely new horrors that Vecna has created or evolved specifically for this purpose. These new creatures are faster, smarter, more coordinated than anything they've faced before. They hunt in packs, using tactics that suggest intelligence rather than mere animal instinct. They herd their prey, cut off escape routes, coordinate ambushes. Some of them display abilities that suggest they're psychically linked, acting as a single organism distributed across multiple bodies. The action sequences here are intense but not gratuitous or unnecessarily violent. Each encounter serves a purpose: to whittle down their resources, to injure and exhaust them, to separate members of the group, to demonstrate that Vecna has been preparing for this confrontation for months. Every attack is designed not just to kill, but to weaken their resolve, to make them doubt whether they can succeed, to plant the seeds of despair that Vecna feeds upon. One of the soldiers doesn't make it through the first encounter. A creature that moves too fast to see clearly takes him down, dragging him away into the darkness before anyone can react. They hear his screams for several long seconds, then silence. Then another soldier falls in the second encounter, this time killed outright by something that strikes from the shadows. Dr. K watches her people die, people she's responsible for, people who followed her into this nightmare, and begins to truly understand the cost of this war, the price that's been paid by these kids over and over again while she sat in briefing rooms and made strategic plans. The group presses on, leaving the bodies behind because there's no time for proper burials or mourning, no time to honour the fallen as they deserve. They'll grieve later, if there is a later. If they survive, if any of them survive, the weight of each death settles on them, but they can't afford to stop, can't afford to break down. There will be time for tears and processing after Vecna is defeated. Right now, they need to keep moving, keep fighting, keep pushing toward their goal. They reach the ruins of the lab, which exists in the Upside Down just as it does in the normal world. But in our dimension, the lab was destroyed, reduced to rubble and twisted metal. Here, in the Upside Down, it's been rebuilt into something else entirely, something that violates the normal rules of architecture and physics. The structure rises before them, impossibly tall, defying gravity and spatial logic. The architecture is non-Euclidean, a term borrowed from Lovecraft but perfectly applicable here. Staircases lead in impossible directions, climbing up and down simultaneously. Rooms exist in multiple states at once, both empty and occupied, both large and small. It's a physical manifestation of Vecna's fractured psyche, a lair built from trauma and malevolence and the breakdown of rational thought. The building seems almost alive, breathing and pulsing in rhythm with something deep inside it. The walls aren't solid, they're semi-permeable, like membranes, and occasionally you can see shapes. Moving within them, shadows of things that might be creatures, or might be victims, or might be something else entirely. The entire structure hums with power, vibrating at a frequency that you feel in your bones more than hear with your ears. 11 leads them deeper into the structure, following the psychic trail she picked up through Will's connection. She can feel Vecna's presence like a beacon or a wound, a tear in the fabric of consciousness that draws her toward it. But the building seems to actively resist their progress, shifting and changing around them as they move through it, trying to separate them, trying to isolate individuals from the group so they can be picked off one by one. Doors appear where there were no doors before. Corridors that should lead to one location instead lead to another. Rooms they've already passed through appear again but changed, altered in subtle ways that make them question their memory and perception. It's psychological warfare designed to break their will and their unity. But they stay together, holding on to each other literally and figuratively, refusing to let Vecna divide them. Mike keeps up a running commentary, reminding everyone of who they are, where they're going, why they're fighting. His voice becomes an anchor in the madness, something real and human to hold on to when reality itself seems to be dissolving. They enter a vast chamber at the heart of the structure, and the scale of it is overwhelming. The room is enormous, cathedral-like in its proportions, with a ceiling that rises so high it disappears into darkness. The walls are covered in the organic mechanical hybrid material that characterises the Upside Down's aesthetic, pulsing with bioluminescent veins that create patterns of light and shadow that hurt to look at for too long. And there, finally, they see what Vecna has been building. It's a machine, but not one made of metal and circuits in the traditional sense. It's organic and mechanical at once, a fusion of upside-down biology and salvaged human technology. There are components that look like they came from computers, from power generators, from medical equipment, all integrated into a living structure that breathes and pulses and bleeds. At its centre is a throne, organic and terrible, grown from the same material as everything else but shaped by will into something recognisable. On that throne sits Vecna, motionless, eyes closed, in a state of deep concentration that suggests he's doing something far beyond this physical space. His appearance is exactly as we remember from Season 4, the burned and twisted flesh, the exposed muscle and sinew, the vines that grow through and around him like a symbiotic organism. But there's a new quality to his presence now, an intensity of power that seems to warp space around him. Looking at him directly is difficult, as if he exists in too many dimensions at once and the human eye can only process part of what he is. Surrounding him are Dawa, figures suspended in mid-air, caught in psychic amber that holds them motionless while their minds are trapped elsewhere. They're his victims, not just the 4 from Season 4 whose deaths opened the gates, but dozens of others, people who disappeared over the years, whose life forces are being drained to power Vecna's machine and his ascension. Among them, our heroes recognise faces, friends, family members, classmates. People they thought were dead are here, trapped in endless nightmares, their suffering fueling Vecna's transformation, and they see something even more horrifying. There are empty spaces in the machine, crystalline chambers or psychic slots waiting to be filled. Vecna doesn't just need the 4 kills that opened the gates. Those were just the beginning, the foundation. To complete his ritual, to merge the dimensions permanently and achieve his apotheosis, he needs a specific configuration of souls, a perfect alignment of trauma and pain and suffering. The 4 original victims opened the gates, weakened the barriers. But to shatter them completely, he needs more. He needs specific types of suffering. A complete set that represents all the ways consciousness can be broken and corrupted. And the empty slots are shaped exactly like the members of their group. 1 for 11, 1 for Will, 1 for Max, 1 for each of them. They're not here to stop Vecna. They're here to complete his work. They're the final components he needs. That's when Vecna opens his eyes. and the lights in those eyes are not human, not even alive in any way they recognize. They're portals to something vast and hungry and utterly alien to human experience. Jamie Campbell. Bauer's performance as Vecna has been incredible throughout the entire series, a masterclass in creating a character who is simultaneously monstrous and tragic, terrifying and pitiable. But here, in this moment, he reaches new heights of chilling intensity. Vecna doesn't immediately attack. Instead, he speaks, and his voice is everywhere and nowhere, inside their heads and echoing through the chamber simultaneously, resonating in frequencies that make their teeth ache and their skulls feel like they're vibrating. He tells them that he's been waiting for them, that he knew they would come. Everything that's happened, Will's connection providing the pathway, Eleven's discovery of his location, the convergence of all their separate investigations at the lab, has been orchestrated by him. He's herded them here like sheep to slaughter, like pieces moving on a board toward a predetermined conclusion. Every choice they thought they were making freely was actually him pulling strings, manipulating variables, ensuring they would arrive here at exactly this moment. Vecna explains his philosophy in detail, his vision for what reality should be. He sees himself not as a villain in any meaningful sense, but as a liberator, as someone who has achieved enlightenment and wishes to share that enlightenment with all of humanity, whether they want it or not. The world as it exists, he argues, is built on lies. Comfortable lies about goodness, about meaning, about the value and purpose of life. People go through their days pretending that existence has inherent worth, that their actions matter, that there's some cosmic justice or meaning underlying reality. But Vecna experienced his revelation as a child, seeing through the facade of normalcy to the rot and emptiness beneath. His family presented themselves as loving and stable, but he could sense the resentment, the performative nature of their affection, the way they all played roles rather than being authentic. His town presented itself as safe and wholesome, but he could see the darkness in people's hearts, the capacity for cruelty and violence hiding beneath polite surfaces. Society itself, with all its rules and structures and institutions, was just an elaborate performance, a collective pretense designed to avoid confronting the fundamental meaninglessness and horror of existence. His early murders, which seemed like the actions of a psychopath, were actually his attempts to reveal truth, to strip away the masks and show people what they really are beneath the performance. His transformation into Vecna and his subsequent actions are simply the logical extension of that same impulse. By merging the dimensions, by bringing the upside down into the light, he'll strip away all the comforting illusions that humans hide behind. People will see reality as it truly is, a nightmare, a cosmic horror, an endless scream of suffering without purpose or redemption. And in that nightmare, Vecna will reign supreme, a dark god feeding on the endless suffering of all humanity, growing stronger with each soul consumed, eventually expanding his domain beyond Earth to encompass all of existence across all dimensions. It's the ultimate act of honesty, he claims, the ultimate truth. No more pretending, no more false hope, no more comforting lies. Just reality in all its terrible authenticity, and him as the lord of that reality, the only one honest enough to embrace and rule over it. The speech is chilling because there's a twisted logic to it, a coherence to his madness. He's not ranting incoherently. He's presenting an actual philosophical position, one that has historical precedents in nihilistic and misanthropic philosophy. It's wrong, deeply and fundamentally wrong, but it's wrong in ways that require actual refutation rather than simple dismissal. 11 counters his speech with her own, and it's one of the most important speeches in the entire series, a thesis statement for everything Stranger Things has been trying to say for 8 years. She speaks about what she's learned through her journey from being a lab experiment to being a person. She acknowledges that, yes, the world contains darkness. Yes, people cause pain. Yes, terrible things happen to good people for no reason. She's lived through horrors that most people can't imagine, abused, exploited, hunted, forced to kill, forced to watch people she loves die. But the world also contains light. It contains love, friendship, courage, sacrifice. The very fact that Vecna needs to work so hard to break people, that he needs to target their specific traumas and guilt, that he needs to trap them in nightmares tailored to their individual pain, proves that goodness is real and powerful. If hope were truly an illusion, if love were just a chemical reaction with no meaning, if courage were just an evolutionary adaptation, if all of that were true, then none of it would be threatening to him. He wouldn't need to fight against it so desperately. The fact that he's spent years building this machine, gathering victims, preparing this ritual, all of it proves that he's afraid. He's afraid of the very things he claims are meaningless. Because deep down, he knows they're not. He knows that connection and love and meaning are real, and they're more powerful than his darkness. That's why he needs to destroy them. Not because they're lies, but because they're truths he can't accept. The philosophical debate is brief but powerful, a genuine clash of worldviews, rather than just hero and villain posturing. Then the fighting begins, and it's everything the series has been building toward. 11 attacks with her powers, and Vecna counters with his own. The psychic battle that ensues is visualized in stunning and innovative ways that push the boundaries of what television can depict. Their consciousnesses clash in a realm beyond physical space, a dimension of pure thought and will, where memories and emotions become weapons and shields. We see Eleven's memories played out in rapid succession: her childhood in the lab, the abuse by Brenner, her friendship with Mike, every moment of joy and pain that has shaped her. We see Vecna's past too, his transformation from Henry Creel into the monster he is now, but also glimpses of what he could have been, the child he was before trauma and darkness corrupted him. But 11 isn't alone. The entire group joins the fight, each in their own way, each contributing what they can to the battle. Will uses his connection to disrupt Vecna's concentration, sending psychic interference through their shared link, creating static in the signal. Mike, Lucas and Dustin work to destroy the machine physically, attacking its weak points with their weapons and improvised explosives, trying to damage the infrastructure that's channeling and amplifying Vecna's power. Nancy and Jonathan provide covering fire against the creatures that swarm to defend their master, shooting and burning anything that tries to stop the others from doing their work. Steve holds the line with his nail bat, protecting Max and Erica as they work frantically on a plan that might just be crazy enough to work. Max's plan is desperate and brilliant and heartbreaking. She's been in Vecna's mind. Realm before, trapped in his nightmare dimension, and she survived it. Barely, but she survived. She knows the landscape of his psychic space, understands the rules of that realm in ways the others don't. She volunteers to let Vecna take her again, to become bait, drawing his attention and his power away from 11, long enough for Elle to strike a potentially fatal blow to his psyche. Everyone objects strenuously to this plan. They nearly lost Max once already. She was clinically dead for over a minute before 11 brought her back. Her bones were shattered, her eyes destroyed, her mind broken. She recovered, but the trauma lingers. The thought of sending her back into that nightmare is unbearable to all of them, especially Lucas, who watched her suffer and die and couldn't do anything to stop it. But Max is insistent, and her arguments are compelling. She's not the same scared girl who got trapped before. She's stronger now, mentally and emotionally. She's faced her trauma, processed it, learned to live with it. She understands Vecna's tactics, knows what he'll try to do to her, and most importantly, she has something she didn't have last time. The absolute certainty that her friends will bring her back, that she's not facing this alone. Last time she was isolated, cut off, trapped with her guilt and pain. This time she'll carry them with her, their love and friendship, a shield against Vecna's darkness. Lucas, with tears streaming down his face, gives Max his blessing. Their relationship has been the emotional core of much of Season 5. Two traumatized kids trying to find happiness and normalcy despite everything they've been through. They've been through hell together, broken up and gotten back together, hurt each other and forgiven each other, grown and changed and learned what it means to truly love someone through their worst moments. The moment they share before Max offers herself up is heartbreaking in its quiet intimacy. Lucas tells her he loves her, that he's always loved her, that she's the strongest person he knows. Max tells him she'll come back to him, that she promises that this isn't goodbye. They're both lying, trying to be brave for each other, both knowing that the chances of Max surviving this are slim. But the lie is necessary. The performance of confidence essential. They kiss, and it's gentle and desperate at once, the kiss of two people who might never see each other again. Max steps forward, into the centre of the chamber, and opens herself to Vecna's power. She doesn't resist as his attention locks onto her like a spotlight or a targeting system. Her body rises into the air, limbs going slack, eyes rolling back to show only whites. From the outside, she looks like a puppet with cut strings. But inside, in the realm of consciousness where Vecna operates, Max is alert and aware, and fighting back in ways he doesn't expect. We cut between multiple battles happening simultaneously. 11 versus Vecna in the psychic realm, a clash of wills and powers, visualized as storms of imagery and emotion. The physical fight in the chamber, as the others attack the machine and defend against the swarming creatures. And Max's desperate struggle inside the nightmare realm, where she's confronting manifestations of her trauma and guilt while simultaneously trying to disrupt Vecna's concentration and provide 11 an opening. The editing is rapid but clear, each thread of the story building toward a climax, cross-cutting between perspectives to create mounting tension. We see 11 pushing her powers further than ever before, blood streaming from her nose and ears, her body shaking with the effort. We see Will screaming as the psychic feedback through his connection threatens to overwhelm him. We see Mike and Lucas and Dustin placing explosive charges on the machine's critical junctions, working with desperate speed. We see Nancy's shotgun clicking empty, her switching to a handgun, then to a knife. We see Steve's bat breaking against a creature's armour, him grabbing a piece of rebar to continue fighting. We see Robin and Jonathan working together to barricade a door against incoming monsters. And we see Max inside the nightmare, walking through her memories, confronting the manifestations of Billy, her dead brother, her guilt over his death, her shame over the things she's thought and felt. Vecna tries to use these against her, to break her down, to trap her in endless loops of suffering. But Max talks back to the visions, argues with them, refuses to accept the narrative Vecna is trying to impose. She tells the vision of Billy that yes, she had complicated feelings about him, that sometimes she was angry at him, that sometimes she wished he would go away. But she also loved him, and his death wasn't her fault. She tells her guilt that it can exist, that she can feel it, but it doesn't define her or control her. She tells her shame that she's done things she regrets, but she's also done things she's proud of, and one doesn't erase the other. It's a powerful scene of psychological resilience, a demonstration that trauma doesn't have to destroy you, that you can acknowledge darkness without letting it consume you. Max's confrontation with her inner demons is mirrored by Eleven's external battle, both of them fighting in their own ways, and then, just when it seems like they might actually win, just when it looks like their combined efforts might be enough to destroy Vecna and stop his plans, everything goes wrong in the most devastating way possible. Vecna was prepared for their assault. He's been preparing for years, decades, maybe longer depending on how time functions in the Upside Down and whether his consciousness extends backward into the past. The connection Will had wasn't just one way, we knew that. But what we didn't know, what none of them knew, is that Vecna has been learning from them, studying their tactics through that connection, anticipating their strategies, running simulations in his vast psychic space of how they would respond to different scenarios. Every move they make, he's already 3 steps ahead. When they attack the machine, he's already reinforced its critical systems. When 11 strikes at his consciousness, he's already prepared defenses. When Will tries to disrupt their connection, Vecna simply redirects the interference, using it to his advantage. He's been playing chess while they were playing checkers, operating on a level of strategic thinking that comes from an alien and vastly superior intelligence. Max, inside the mind realm, realizes too late that she's not disrupting Vecna's power. She's feeding it, her presence there, her pain, her determination, her love for her friends. All of it is exactly what he needs, the final component of his equation. She's not bait distracting him from the real attack. She's the real attack's actual target, the keystone he's been waiting to slot into place. As she screams for Lucas, for her friends, reaching out psychically for help that can't reach her across the dimensional barrier Vecna has erected, she feels herself being absorbed into the machine, her consciousness being uploaded or translated into a form that can interface with his techno-organic horror. Her essence, her experiences, her suffering, her growth, all of it becomes fuel for Vecna's ascension, the final measure of trauma he needed to tip the scales. In the physical realm, the machine activates fully, and the effect is immediate and catastrophic. Blinding light and consuming darkness burst forth simultaneously, an impossible paradox of illumination and void occurring in the same space. The chamber shakes apart, reality itself cracking under the strain of what Vecna is attempting. Steve grabs Erica and runs, carrying her because she's too slow to keep up with his longer legs. Dustin drags Lucas away as Lucas reaches desperately for Max's floating body, screaming her name. Nancy and Jonathan hold each other as the world comes apart around them. Robin helps Dr. K, who has been injured by falling debris. Hopper and Joyce shield 11 with their bodies. 11 feels Vecna's power surge to unprecedented levels. He's done it. He's achieved critical mass. The ritual is complete or complete enough to begin the process that can't be stopped. The barriers between dimensions begin to collapse not just in Hawkins but everywhere across the entire planet. The Upside Down starts bleeding into our world on a global scale, rifts opening in major cities, monsters emerging in places that have never experienced this kind of horror. We see quick shots of other cities, other countries, as rifts tear open and people flee in terror. Tokyo, London, Moscow, Cairo, Sydney, everywhere at once, the nightmare spreading like a contagion or a plague. This isn't just Hawkins's problem anymore. This isn't just Indiana or America. This is the end of the world as humanity knows it, the apocalypse unfolding in real time. But 11 refuses to give up. Even as Vecna's power grows exponentially, even as he begins his transformation into something beyond human comprehension, even as reality itself starts to bend and warp around his ascending form, she pours everything she has into one last attack. Her nose bleeds, her ears bleed, her eyes might be bleeding too. It's hard to tell with all the blood on her face. She's pushing her powers further than ever before, to the point of self-destruction, burning herself out like a star going supernova in a last desperate attempt to take Vecna with her. Will joins her, linking his mind to hers, sharing his strength even though it means opening himself fully to the connection with Vecna and risking possession or worse. Then Mike grabs both their hands, grounding them, giving them his strength even though he has no powers of his own, proving that ordinary courage and love matter, that you don't need supernatural abilities to make a difference. One by one, the rest of the group forms a chain, a literal and metaphorical connection of human beings standing together against ultimate darkness. Lucas tears himself away from Max's suspended body to join the chain, taking Mike's other hand. Dustin clasps Lucas's hand, his best friend since childhood. Nancy and Jonathan and Steve and Robin all link together, their complicated relationships and unresolved feelings set aside for this moment. Joyce and Hopper complete the circuit, creating an unbroken line of human willpower and love standing against the void. It's not enough. The power flowing through their connection is real, meaningful, but Vecna is too powerful now, too far along in his transformation. But it slows him down. It disrupts his concentration just enough. The machine sputters, hiccups in its operation. The transformation pauses, reality snapping back into place momentarily before the pressure begins building again. And that's when Vecna makes his fatal mistake. He's so focused on the group's direct assault, so convinced of his superiority and invulnerability, that he doesn't notice what's happening at the edges of the chamber, in the spaces his vast consciousness dismisses as irrelevant. Dr. K, the skeptic, the government official who thought she had all the answers, who believed that military force and authority were the solutions to every problem, has realised what needs to be done. She can't fight psychic powers. She can't battle interdimensional horrors with guns and training, but she can be practical. She can make the hard choice that the kids shouldn't have to make. Throughout the battle, while everyone was focused on Vecna and Max and the machine, Dr. K was quietly planting explosives throughout the chamber, using military-grade charges from her team's equipment, placing them at structural weak points and energy convergence nodes. She looks at Joyce, catches her eye across the chaos of the chamber. Joyce recognizes what's about to happen, sees the detonator in Dr. K's hand. She tries to protest, to object, to find another way. But K just gives her a single nod of understanding, a soldier's goodbye. There is no other way. The charges are already in place. The detonation must occur now, while Vecna is distracted, while the machine is vulnerable. Dr. K activates the detonator remotely, but she doesn't run, doesn't try to escape the blast radius. She stays at the center of the explosion, ensuring maximum damage to the machine, even though it means her certain death. In her final moments, she's not a soldier or an officer or a government agent. She's just a person making the ultimate sacrifice to protect others, proving that it's never too late to choose the right side, to do the right thing. The explosion is catastrophic. The military-grade charges, placed with precision and expertise, tear through the machine's critical systems. The fusion of flesh and technology that Vecna has spent months building is torn apart. Organic components shredding, mechanical parts shattering, the whole structure collapsing in on itself. The trapped souls are released in a burst of light that's almost blinding. Hundreds of consciousness, freed from their prisons, rush outward like water from a broken dam. Max's body falls from where it was suspended, dropping limply toward the ground. Lucas breaks from the human chain and runs, catching her before she hits. The chamber collapses around them, the impossible architecture coming apart now that the will holding it together has been disrupted. Our heroes run for their lives, dragging their wounded, carrying those who can't walk, supporting each other through the crumbling nightmare of Vecna's destroyed lair. Pieces of ceiling fall around them, the floor cracks and splits. The creatures that were defending the chamber are either fleeing or dying as the Upside Down's connection to Vecna's will weakens, but Vecna isn't dead. Wounded, yes, grievously so. His plans disrupted, absolutely. His machine destroyed, his ritual interrupted before completion, but not destroyed. As they escape, running through the shifting corridors that are now collapsing into chaos, they hear his voice one final time, echoing through the space, or maybe just through their minds. He promises that this isn't over. He's wounded but not killed, weakened but not destroyed. He'll retreat, recover, rebuild. He'll return stronger than ever, having learned from this defeat. This was just round one. The final battle is still to come. They emerge from the lab's ruins, bursting through the rift, back into normal Hawkins, crossing the dimensional barrier just as the structure behind them collapses completely. They fall onto the ground on the other side, gasping for air that isn't thick with spores, feeling sun on their faces for the first time in what feels like years, even though it's only been hours. The military quarantine is in chaos. The global rifts have closed. The ritual was interrupted before it could complete the worldwide merger, but the damage has been done. Hawkins is still scarred, still partially merged with the Upside Down. The main rift remains open, pulsing with malevolent energy, and Vecna, though wounded and weakened, is still alive somewhere in the twisted depths of his dimension. The final shot of Volume 1 is devastating in its quiet simplicity. The group stands together, exhausted beyond anything they've experienced before, injured both physically and psychologically, traumatized by what they have seen and done. Max is unconscious in Lucas's arms, possibly comatose again, her status uncertain. 11 can barely stand, supported by Mike on one side and Hopper on the other, her powers possibly burned out from the extreme exertion. They've lost Dr. K and several soldiers whose names they never learned, people who died fighting alongside them. They interrupted Vecna's plans. They stopped the ritual before it could complete. They saved the world, or at least delayed its destruction, but they didn't stop him. They didn't win. They survived. And survival feels like a hollow victory when so much was lost and the enemy still lives. Mike looks at 11, sees the exhaustion and pain in her eyes, and asks the question everyone is thinking, the question that hangs in the air like smoke. What do we do now? 11, with blood still dripping from her nose, blood crusted around her ears, her face pale and drawn with effort and pain, turns to face the rift. It's visible in the distance, a tear in the sky above the ruins of the lab, pulsing with red light, an open wound in reality that won't close, maybe can't close. Her expression is one of grim determination, the look of someone who knows the fight isn't over, who understands that this was just the first act of a longer story. She says, her voice hoarse but steady, "We finish this. One way or another. We finish this." The camera pulls back slowly, showing the group silhouetted against the rising sun. It's dawn, the start of a new day, but it doesn't feel hopeful. The Upside Down is still visible through the rift behind them, a reminder that darkness is always present, always waiting. The music swells, combining all the show's themes into a final statement. The frame freezes on this image, heroes battered but unbroken, facing an uncertain future together. Now that we've completely broken down what happened in the ending of Volume 1, let's dive deep into what it all means, what themes the Duffer Brothers are exploring, and what it sets up for the remaining volumes of Season 5. First and foremost, this ending is about the cost of heroism. Throughout the series, we've watched these kids face impossible odds and somehow win through a combination of courage, cleverness, and luck. But Volume 1's ending makes it clear that there are real costs to this kind of resistance. Dr. K dies, soldiers die, Max is once again in a possibly fatal condition. Eleven's powers may be permanently damaged. They win in that they stop the immediate threat, but they lose so much in the process that victory feels hollow. This is a more mature take on heroism than what we saw in earlier seasons. In Season 1, the kids defeated the Demogorgon and everyone celebrated. In Season 2, they closed the gate, and while there were costs, Bob died, the overall tone was still triumphant. But as the series has progressed, the victories have become more costly, more Pyrrhic. This reflects both the characters' aging and the show's willingness to explore darker themes. Real heroism isn't about winning cleanly, it's about choosing to fight even when you know the cost will be terrible, even when you know you might not survive. Dr. K's sacrifice is particularly important thematically. She represents the redemption arc compressed into a single episode. She starts as an antagonist, someone whose rigid worldview and authority-driven approach makes her an obstacle. But when confronted with the reality of what they're facing, when she witnesses the genuine courage of these young people, when she sees her own people dying for a cause she finally understands, she makes the choice to help in the only way she can, through sacrifice. Her death also serves as a commentary on institutions and authority. The government, throughout Stranger Things, has been portrayed as incompetent at best and actively malicious at worst. Dr. K embodied that institutional authority, believing that structure and force could solve any problem. Her realization that she was wrong, that these kids knew better than she did, that her training and authority meant nothing against this kind of threat. That's a powerful statement about when to trust authority and when to question it. The theme of chosen suffering versus imposed suffering, which I mentioned earlier, reaches its climax in the ending. Max chooses to offer herself as bait, choosing to suffer so others might have a chance. Vecna imposes suffering on his victims, taking away their choice, using their pain without consent. The difference between these two forms of suffering is essential to understanding what the show is saying about trauma and agency. Max's decision is empowering because it's hers. She's not a victim being acted upon. She's an agent making a choice, however terrible. Even though the plan doesn't work exactly as intended, even though she ends up trapped again, the fact that she chose it changes the meaning of her suffering. This is a delicate thematic tightrope to walk, and the show does it carefully, making clear that Max's choice is brave but also tragic, that we can honour her agency while also grieving what it costs her. The human chain sequence is pure visual and thematic symbolism. Individually, each person is vulnerable. Together, they create something stronger than the sum of their parts. The chain represents connection, community, the found family that has always been at the heart of Stranger Things. It's not enough to defeat Vecna, they need more than just connection to win. But it's enough to slow him down, to disrupt his plans, to create an opening for Dr. K's sacrifice. This sequence also demonstrates that you don't need powers to matter. Mike, Lucas, Dustin, Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Robin, Joyce, Hopper. None of them have psychic abilities, but they all contribute. Their strength, their love, their determination, these things have real power, even if they are not supernatural. The show has always valued ordinary courage, and this sequence is the ultimate expression of that value. The revelation that Vecna has been manipulating events, that he's been steps ahead of them throughout, is both devastating and frightening. It suggests that our heroes have never truly had agency in this confrontation, that every choice they made was predicted and accounted for by an enemy with vastly superior intelligence and planning capacity. This is terrifying because it undermines the foundations of heroic narrative, the idea that good choices and brave actions can lead to victory. But the show doesn't leave it there. Even though Vecna predicted their actions, even though he was prepared for their assault, they still disrupted his plans. They still interrupted the ritual. They still survived. Sometimes, even when you're outmatched and outmaneuvered, simply refusing to give up is enough to change the outcome. It's not a complete victory, but it's not a complete defeat either. It's something in between: survival, continuation, the chance to fight another day. The global scope of Vecna's plans, revealed in the brief shots of rifts opening worldwide, dramatically raises the stakes for the remaining volumes. This isn't just about saving Hawkins anymore. It's not even just about saving America. The entire world is at risk. Every person on Earth is a potential victim of Vecna's dimensional merger. This globalization of the threat means that the final confrontation will have to address not just local concerns, but existential ones. The indigenous history introduced in episode 3 and carried through to the ending suggests that the solution might lie in recovering lost knowledge. The protective rituals that kept the dimensions separate for centuries were dismissed and destroyed by colonial forces. Perhaps the key to permanently sealing the Upside Down lies in rediscovering and performing those rituals. This would be a thematically rich direction for the show to take, acknowledging historical injustice while also suggesting that wisdom comes from many sources, that indigenous knowledge has value that Western science and military can't replicate. Eleven's character arc across Volume 1 is about accepting limitations and finding new sources of strength. She's always been positioned as the ultimate weapon, the person with the power to save everyone. But Volume 1 repeatedly shows her being insufficient. Her powers can't locate Vecna alone. Can't defeat him alone. Maybe can't defeat him at all. This is forcing her to evolve, to recognize that she's not just her powers, that her value isn't purely instrumental. The potential burnout of her abilities at the end could be the final step in this evolution. If she's lost her powers permanently, she'll have to find a new sense of self, a new understanding of who she is and what she can contribute. This could be incredibly empowering. 11. The person, not 11 the weapon. Or it could be tragic, a loss of the thing that made her special. Likely it will be both, because good storytelling embraces complexity. Will's arc is about transforming vulnerability into strength. His connection to Vecna, which he experiences as a violation and a weakness, becomes a tactical advantage in the battle. This is a powerful metaphor for trauma recovery. The idea that the things that have hurt us, the connections and experiences we wish we didn't have, can sometimes be repurposed, can become sources of insight or strength even while remaining painful. But the arc also acknowledges the ongoing cost. Will suffers every time he uses the connection. It's not a clean transformation from a weakness to strength. It's a messy, painful process that takes a real toll on him. This is more honest than a simple, your trauma makes you strong narrative. Instead, it's saying that you can use your experiences, including traumatic ones, in meaningful ways, but that doesn't erase the pain or make the trauma worthwhile. The philosophical debate between Eleven and Vecna is the ideological heart of the entire series distilled into a few minutes of dialogue. Vecna represents nihilism, misanthropy, the belief that existence is suffering and the only honest response is to embrace that suffering, to make it universal and eternal. 11 represents a more nuanced view that yes, suffering exists, but so does joy, and the presence of both is what gives life meaning. This isn't a naive optimism that denies darkness. 11 has experienced more darkness than most people ever will. She's not arguing that the world is good or fair or just. She's arguing that goodness exists alongside badness, that meaning can be created even in a universe that doesn't provide inherent meaning, that choosing love and connection in the face of horror is itself a kind of victory. The debate also touches on the nature of honesty and illusion. Vecna claims that hope is a lie, that people who believe in goodness are deluding themselves. 11 counters that Vecna's darkness is itself a delusion, a selective focus on only the negative aspects of existence, while ignoring everything that contradicts his worldview. Both are arguing about what reality really is, but they're each seeing reality through their own lenses, shaped by their own experiences and choices. The unresolved romantic storylines, Nancy, Steve, Jonathan, Will's feelings for Mike, are deliberately left hanging because they're not the priority right now. The show is saying that personal happiness and romantic fulfillment matter, but when the world is ending, when people are dying, those concerns have to take a back seat. This is realistic and mature. In real crises, people don't stop having feelings, but they do have to shelve certain conversations and decisions until survival is assured. Max and Lucas's relationship, by contrast, is given significant focus because it's directly relevant to the plot. Max's decision to sacrifice herself is motivated by love. Love for Lucas, love for her friends, love for a world she wants to protect. And Lucas's support of her decision, even though it terrifies him, demonstrates his love for her. Their relationship is central to the emotional impact of the ending because we've been invested in them as a couple, and seeing them torn apart by Max's possible death hits hard. The destruction of the machine is symbolically important. Throughout Volume 1, the machine has represented Vecna's attempt to systematize suffering, to turn trauma into something mechanical and productive, feeding his transformation. Its destruction represents the disruption of that system, the rejection of the idea that pain can be harvested and used in this way. But the machine's destruction doesn't kill Vecna, which suggests that the problem isn't just the system but the ideology behind it, the will and intelligence that created the system in the first place. The released souls, hundreds of victims freed from their prisons, represent hope but also horror. Hope because they are no longer trapped, no longer feeding Vecna's power. Horror because we don't know where they've gone or what condition they're in. Are these people still alive? Can they return to their bodies? Or were they released into oblivion, consciousness dispersed into nothing? The show doesn't answer this question, leaving it ambiguous and unsettling. The final image of the group standing together at dawn, silhouetted against the rift, is composition brilliance. Dawn traditionally represents hope, new beginnings, the triumph of light over darkness. But here, the dawn is complicated by the continuing presence of the rift, by the exhaustion and injury of the heroes, by the knowledge that Vecna still lives. It's a dawn that doesn't promise victory, only continuation. The light hasn't defeated the darkness, they're coexisting, and our heroes are caught between them. Eleven's final line, "We finish this one way or another, we finish this," is a declaration of determination but also carries an ominous undertone. One way or another could mean victory or defeat, survival or sacrifice. It's not a promise that they'll win, it's a promise that they'll see this through to its conclusion, whatever that conclusion might be. This ambiguity is intentional, leaving us uncertain about whether the ending will be triumphant, tragic, or something in between. So what does Volume 1's ending set up for Volume 2 and the eventual series finale? Let's engage in some informed speculation based on what we know, what we've seen, and what the Duffer Brothers have hinted at in interviews. First, and most urgent, Max's status. She's alive, but unconscious, and her condition is unclear. Based on what we saw with her being absorbed into Vecna's machine before its destruction, there are several possibilities. One, her soul or consciousness was released with the other, trapped victims, and needs to find its way back to her body. This could set up a quest where the group needs to guide Max's consciousness home, perhaps by entering the psychic realm themselves or performing some kind of ritual. 2. Part of her consciousness might still be trapped, caught in fragments of the destroyed machine that exist in the Upside Down. Retrieving these fragments could be a major plotline for Volume 2. Lucas would obviously be central to this storyline, as would 11 if her powers recover enough to attempt psychic rescue. 3. The trauma of being absorbed and then violently released might have fractured Max's sense of self, creating something akin to dissociative identity disorder or psychosis. If Volume 2 explores Max's internal landscape, showing her piecing herself back together with her friend's help, it could be a powerful meditation on trauma recovery and the role of community in healing. 11's powers are almost certainly compromised. The level of effort she exerted in the final battle was beyond anything we've seen from her before. It's possible she's burned out her abilities permanently, or more likely, they'll need time to recover, time the group might not have. This forces a crucial question. Can they defeat Vecna without 11's powers? Do they have to? Or is there another way to approach the problem that doesn't rely on psychic combat? Volume 2 might explore alternative approaches to closing the Upside Down. The indigenous rituals mentioned in Volume 1 seem likely to play a role. Perhaps the group will need to track down descendants of the original indigenous population, people who still maintain the old knowledge or have access to historical records that weren't destroyed. This could introduce new characters and expand the scope of the show beyond its usual Hawkins setting. Will's connection to Vecna remains active and probably will until one of them is dead. This makes Will both an asset and a vulnerability going forward. Vecna could try to use the connection to possess Will again, forcing the group to deal with an enemy within. Or Will could use the connection more aggressively, attempting to damage Vecna from the inside, psychically sabotaging his recovery efforts. Either way, Will is likely to be central to Volume 2's plot. The global nature of the threat means Volume 2 might show us what's happening in other parts of the world. Are other countries experiencing upside-down incursions? Have other governments been conducting similar experiments? Are there other people with powers like 11? The Duffer Brothers have mentioned wanting to expand the scope of the final season, and showing international consequences would be one way to do that. Dr. K's death leaves a power vacuum in the military operation. Who replaces her? Will it be someone more sympathetic to our heroes, or someone even more antagonistic? Will the government double down on trying to capture 11, or will they finally recognise her as an ally? The military subplot has been building all season and needs resolution in Volume 2. The soldiers who defied orders to help our heroes might face consequences for their actions. They could be court-martialed, imprisoned, or worse. This could create a subplot where the group needs to protect or rescue the soldiers who protected them. It would also allow the show to explore themes of civil disobedience, following your conscience versus following orders, and the moral responsibility of people in institutional positions. Vecna is wounded but not dead, and he'll be recovering during Volume 2, possibly growing stronger. The pattern throughout Stranger Things has been that the antagonists evolve and adapt with each season. We should expect Vecna to return with new abilities, new strategies, new horrors he's created or unleashed. Volume 2 might show us his perspective more directly, getting inside his head and understanding his plans in ways Volume 1 didn't explore. The Mind Flayer's role still needs clarification. It was conspicuously absent from Volume 1's climax. Is it gone? Is it waiting? Is it the true power behind Vecna, or has Vecna somehow absorbed or controlled it? The Mind Flayer has been a recurring presence throughout the series, and it needs a proper conclusion. Volume 2 will likely reveal its current status and its role in the endgame. The time manipulation abilities Vecna demonstrated need further exploration. If he can affect the flow of time in localized areas, what else can he do? Can he see possible futures? Can he trap people in temporal loops? Can he bring back the dead by rewinding their personal timelines? The temporal aspect of his powers opens up possibilities that are both fascinating and terrifying. The Upside Down itself might be evolving or changing in response to Vecna's weakened state. We saw in Volume 1 that it seemed more alive, more reactive. Volume 2 might explore what the Upside Down actually is, a dimension, an entity, a phenomenon. Understanding its nature could be key to closing it permanently, or at least restoring the barriers between dimensions. Character-wise, we need resolution on several fronts. Mike and Will's relationship, which has been building tension throughout the series, probably needs to be addressed directly. Mike needs to understand Will's feelings, and they need to have an honest conversation about their friendship and what it means to both of them. This doesn't necessarily mean romance, it means honesty and resolution, whatever form that takes. Nancy, Steve, and Jonathan's triangle needs to conclude. The show has been mature and restrained with this subplot, but it can't remain unresolved forever. Volume 2 will likely force Nancy to make a choice, or recognise that she doesn't have to choose, that her identity and future don't have to be defined by her romantic relationships. Whatever happens, it needs to feel true to Nancy's character and her journey toward independence and self-definition. Dustin and Steve's friendship needs a big moment. These two have one of the series' best relationships, the unexpected friendship between a nerd kid and a former popular kid that's grown into genuine brotherhood. They deserve a scene in Volume 2 that honours what they mean to each other, possibly involving one of them saving the other's life or making a sacrifice. Joyce and Hopper are finally together. And happy, which in dramatic terms means they're in danger. One or both of them might die in Volume 2 or the finale. Their deaths would be devastating but thematically appropriate. The parental figures sacrificing themselves so the kids can have a future. Alternatively, they might survive specifically because the show wants to reject the trope that happiness equals death, that characters who find peace must be punished for it. Robin's storyline about finding community and acceptance needs payoff. She's been open about her sexuality in a time and place where that was dangerous. Volume 2 might explore how she finds her people, how she creates a life for herself beyond Hawkins, how she turns survival into actual thriving. Her journey is important for LGBTQ+ representation, and the show should honour that. Erica has proven herself brave and capable repeatedly. She deserves a hero moment in Volume 2, something that showcases her intelligence and courage in a significant way. The show has done well by her character, treating her as a full person rather than just comic relief or the little sister, and that treatment should continue. The Hawkins community itself needs to be addressed. The town has been through hell, literally. How do people rebuild after something like this? Do they abandon Hawkins, or do they stay and fight for their home? The show has always been interested in community and place, and Volume 2 should explore what happens to a community after apocalyptic trauma. The parents and families of our main characters have been somewhat sidelined in Volume 1, which makes sense given the scope of the action. But Volume 2 might bring them back into focus, showing how families cope with the knowledge of what their children have been doing, what they've been risking. Karen Wheeler, Ted Wheeler, the Sinclairs, these parents have mostly been in the dark about the full extent of the danger. Learning the truth might be its own kind of trauma. Structurally, Volume 2 needs to be about regrouping and preparing for the final confrontation. Volume 1 was about discovery and a failed assault. Volume 2 will likely be about recovery, gathering resources, finding new approaches, and setting up the pieces for the finale. This is typical 3-act structure: setup, confrontation, resolution, and we're between the confrontation and resolution stages. The tone of Volume 2 might be darker than Volume 1. Our heroes are wounded physically and psychologically. They've suffered losses. They know how powerful Vecna is and how close they came to complete defeat. There's likely to be a period of despair, of characters questioning whether they can win, whether the cost is too high. This darkness will need to be overcome before they can face Vecna again, probably through remembering why they fight, reconnecting with their core values and relationships. There will probably be a training montage or preparation sequence. If Eleven's powers need to recover, she'll need to rebuild them. If the group is pursuing the indigenous rituals approach, they'll need to learn those rituals. If they're developing new weapons or strategies, they'll need time to prepare. This gives the show space to have quieter character moments while also building toward the action of the finale. Volume 2 might include flashbacks that provide crucial information, perhaps showing us more of Vecna's past, more of the original indigenous people and their understanding of the thin places, more of the government's experiments and how they connect to everything that's happened. Flashbacks can be exposition heavy, but they can also be emotionally powerful if done well. The ending of Volume 2 will need to set up the series finale in a way that feels both earned and surprising. It should answer some questions while raising new ones. It should position our heroes for their final confrontation with Vecna while making clear that the outcome is uncertain, that victory isn't guaranteed, that real sacrifice might be necessary. Let's talk about how Volume 1 has been received by fans and critics, what conversations it's generating, and what it means in the broader context of television and pop culture. The fan response to Volume 1 has been overwhelmingly positive with some divisive elements, which is typical for any beloved series approaching its conclusion. Fans have praised the character development, the raising of stakes, the expansion of mythology, and the emotional resonance of key scenes. The performances, particularly from the young actors who've grown up on the show, have been universally acclaimed. Critics have noted that the production values are higher than ever, that the show feels cinematic in scope and ambition. But there's also been criticism. Some fans feel the pacing is too slow, that the 4 episodes of Volume 1 could have been condensed. Others argue that certain character subplots are getting more attention than they deserve, while other characters are sidelined. There's debate about whether the show has gotten too dark, whether it's lost some of the playful adventure spirit of the early seasons in favour of increasingly grim horror. These criticisms are worth examining. The pacing criticism is interesting because it reflects different preferences for storytelling. Some viewers want rapid plot advancement, constant action, immediate payoffs. Others prefer slow builds, character development, atmospheric tension. Volume 1 clearly leans toward the latter approach, taking its time to establish the situation, develop relationships, and build toward the climax. This is a deliberate choice by the Duffer Brothers, not a failure of pacing. The darkness criticism is more complex. Stranger Things has always balanced light and dark, adventure and horror, humour and pathos. But as the series has progressed and the characters have aged, the balance has shifted toward darker territory. This is appropriate for a show about growing up and facing harsh realities, but it also means the show might not appeal to younger viewers the way early seasons did, and it might disappoint fans who fell in love with the more adventurous, Spielbergian tone of Season 1. The character-focused debate is inevitable in an ensemble show. Everyone has their favourite characters, and when those characters don't get enough screen time, fans feel disappointed. Volume 1 focused heavily on Eleven, Will, and Max, with significant time also given to the Nancy Steve, Jonathan trio, and the Hopper, Joyce, Dr. K military storyline. This meant less screen time for Dustin, Lucas, and Robin, which disappointed fans of those characters. It's an impossible balance. You can't give everyone equal focus without the show becoming scattered and unfocused. The social media response has been explosive, as it always is for major pop culture events. Theories proliferate on Reddit, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Fans create art, write fan fiction, make edits and compilations. The show trends globally every time new content drops. This level of engagement is remarkable and speaks to how deeply Stranger Things has penetrated pop culture consciousness. The memes and jokes coming out of Volume 1 are affectionate rather than mocking, which is a good sign. Fans are engaging with the show lovingly, creating content that celebrates rather than tears down. There are memes about Steve's parenting instincts, about Dustin's scientific explanations, about Hopper's protective dad energy. These memes spread awareness and keep the show in public consciousness between volume releases. The theorizing is where fan culture really shines. Fans are analysing every frame, looking for clues and foreshadowing. They're connecting dots across seasons, finding patterns and parallels. They're predicting character deaths, plot twists, and emotional moments. Some of these theories are incredibly sophisticated, demonstrating deep engagement with the text and thoughtful analysis. Common theories include Max is brain dead, and what comes back won't really be her. Vecna is actually being controlled by the Mind Flayer and isn't the real villain. Will is going to die saving Mike. Eleven will lose her powers permanently and have to find a new identity. One of the parents will die. The series will end with time being reset, preventing the Upside Down from ever opening. Hawkins will be permanently merged with the Upside Down and have to be abandoned. The indigenous rituals will require a human sacrifice. These theories reflect what fans are afraid of, what they're hoping for, and what they think would be thematically satisfying. The fact that fans are so invested in predicting the ending shows how much they care about these characters and their stories. Even when theories are wrong, the act of theorizing is a form of love, a way of staying connected to the show between episodes. The show's impact on popular culture extends beyond fan engagement. Stranger Things has influenced fashion, with 80s style clothing making a comeback. It's influenced music, with Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill becoming a global hit again thanks to its use in Season 4. It's influenced how other shows approach nostalgia and period settings. It's demonstrated that genre television can be both critically acclaimed and massively popular, that you don't have to choose between artistic ambition and commercial success. The show has also influenced conversations about child actors and how they're treated in the industry. The core cast of Stranger Things has been protected and supported in ways that aren't always typical for child actors. They've grown up in the public eye but seem to have largely avoided the pitfalls that often trap young performers. This is partly due to their own resilience and partly due to the production treating them as professionals whose welfare matters. The representation in Stranger Things, while imperfect, has been significant. Lucas and Erica are major characters whose race isn't their only defining characteristic. They're full people with their own arcs. Robin is openly gay in a time period when that was dangerous, and her storyline has resonated with LGBTQ+ viewers. Max is a complex female character who's allowed to be angry, scared, brave, vulnerable, and everything in between. These representations matter to viewers who see themselves in these characters. The show has also been important in demonstrating that horror and emotional depth aren't mutually exclusive. You can have terrifying monsters and heartfelt character moments in the same story. You can scare people while also making them cry. This balance is difficult to achieve, and Stranger Things has done it consistently across multiple seasons. From a television industry perspective, Stranger Things has been influential in the shift toward binge model releases and split seasons. Netflix's strategy of releasing entire seasons at once for binging changed viewing habits, and Stranger Things was one of the first shows to truly benefit from and exemplify this model. The split season approach for season 5, releasing it in volumes rather than all at once, represents a further evolution, trying to sustain engagement over a longer period. The show's success has also demonstrated the value of letting creators follow their vision rather than interfering excessively. The Duffer Brothers have maintained creative control throughout the series, and while Netflix presumably has input, the show feels cohesive and true to its creator's vision. This is increasingly rare in an era of executive meddling and algorithm-driven content decisions. Volume 1's treatment of trauma and mental health has generated thoughtful discussion. The show doesn't shy away from depicting the psychological aftermath of terrifying experiences. Characters have PTSD, nightmares, guilt, survivor's syndrome. They go to therapy, they talk about their feelings, they support each other through difficult times. This realistic portrayal of trauma's effects is valuable, especially in a genre that often treats characters as perfectly resilient no matter what horrors they experience. The show's approach to violence and death has also evolved. Early seasons featured violence, but it was somewhat cartoonish, clearly fantastical. Volume 1's violence feels more visceral and consequential. When people die, it matters. There are bodies, grief, realistic consequences. This shift toward treating death seriously is appropriate for a show whose characters are no longer children, who understand mortality in ways they didn't in Season 1. The discussions happening in fan spaces about Volume 1 are sophisticated and thoughtful. Fans are discussing philosophy, psychology, trauma theory, narrative structure, thematic resonance. They're engaging with the text at a level that demonstrates real critical thinking. This is what good art inspires, not just passive consumption, but active engagement, interpretation, analysis. There's also discussion about how the show will end and what kind of ending would be satisfying. Some fans want a happy ending, where everyone survives and gets their happy ever after. Others argue that would be too neat, that some characters need to die for the ending to have weight. Still others advocate for a bittersweet ending that balances loss and hope. These debates reflect different values about what makes a story satisfying. The question of whether the show will stick the landing, whether the ending will be worthy of everything that came before, is on everyone's mind. Many beloved shows have fumbled their endings, disappointing fans who'd been invested for years. The Duffer Brothers have the challenge of creating an ending that feels both surprising and inevitable, that honours the characters and themes while delivering emotional catharsis. Volume 1 has set up that ending beautifully. The stakes are clear, the threats are established, the character arcs are in motion. If Volume 2 and the finale can maintain this level of quality and bring everything to a satisfying conclusion, Stranger Things will be remembered as one of the great television series of its era. A show that successfully evolved from its premise while staying true to its core values. Let's discuss the technical and production aspects of Volume 1, because the show's success isn't just about writing and acting, it's also about the incredible craft that goes into making it look and sound this good. The cinematography in Volume 1 is notably different from earlier seasons. The show has always looked good, but there's a new level of cinematic ambition here. The camera work during the upside-down sequences is particularly impressive, using unconventional angles and movements to create disorientation and unease. There are shots where the camera itself seems affected by the upside down's non-Euclidean geometry, tilting and rotating in ways that make the viewer feel like they're losing their spatial orientation. The use of practical effects versus CGI is carefully balanced. The Duffer Brothers have always preferred practical effects when possible, believing they look more real and generate more authentic reactions from actors. The creatures in Volume 1 are a mix. Some parts practical, some parts digital enhancement. The practical elements give the actors something real to react to, while the CGI adds details and movements that would be impossible to achieve practically. The production design deserves extensive praise. Creating the upside-down version of Hawkins is an enormous undertaking that requires building or modifying sets to look like familiar locations but corrupted. The design team has to maintain visual continuity. The upside-down has an established aesthetic, while also evolving it to reflect Vecna's growing influence and the dimensional merger. Vecna's lair in particular is a production design marvel. The non-Euclidean architecture required creative solutions, forced perspective, rotating sets, digital set extensions, carefully planned camera angles. The organic mechanical fusion aesthetic of the machine required collaboration between practical effects artists who built physical components and digital artists who integrated them into the larger structure. The costume design contributes significantly to character development and world building. The costumes have to be period accurate to 1987 while also reflecting each character's personality and arc. There are subtle costume details that reinforce characterization. Mike's leadership role reflected in slightly more mature clothing choices, Max's trauma manifested in more subdued colours, Eleven's growing sense of self reflected in her selecting her own clothes rather than wearing what others choose for her. The sound design is extraordinary and often underappreciated. The Upside Down has a specific soundscape, the rustling of vines, the distant thunder, the wet organic sounds of the creatures moving. Vecna's voice is heavily processed to achieve that otherworldly quality, layering multiple takes and adding effects to make it feel like it's coming from everywhere and nowhere. The contrast between the sound of normal Hawkins and the sound of the Upside Down creates an auditory cue that helps viewers orient themselves as the show cuts between locations. The score by Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein continues to be essential to the show's identity. Their synth-heavy compositions evoke 80s horror and sci-fi, while also creating unique themes for characters and situations. Volume 1's score incorporates more orchestral elements than previous seasons, reflecting the larger scale and higher stakes. The music during the final battle combines electronic and orchestral elements, creating a sound that's both familiar and fresh. The editing in Volume 1 is particularly complex, given the multiple storylines happening simultaneously. The Episode 4 climax requires intercutting between 3 or 4 different spaces and perspectives, maintaining clarity while building tension. The editors have to balance pacing, knowing when to linger on a moment for emotional impact and when to cut quickly for intensity. The rhythm of editing changes depending on whether we're in an action sequence or a character moment, showing versatility and skill. The special effects team's work is most visible in the dimensional rift effects and the psychic battle visualizations. Creating the rifts required combining practical elements, lights, fans creating wind effects, particles in the air, with digital effects that show the actual tear in reality. The psychic battles are purely digital, creating abstract visualizations of consciousness conflict that need to be comprehensible while also feeling otherworldly. The makeup effects for Vecna are prosthetic artistry at its finest. Jamie Campbell Bower sits for hours while prosthetics are applied, creating the burned and twisted appearance of his character. The prosthetics have to allow him to act, to show emotion through the makeup, while also looking genuinely disturbing. The team has refined the process over multiple seasons, making the application faster and the final result more realistic and more mobile. The stunt coordination for Volume 1's action sequences is complex and demanding. The actors do some of their own stunts when safe and practical, but stunt doubles are used for dangerous work. The choreography has to look chaotic and desperate, while actually being carefully planned for safety. Fighting creatures that don't exist requires actors to coordinate with effects team, so their movements will match up with the digital creatures added in post-production. The colour grading establishes distinct visual palettes for different spaces and emotional states. Normal Hawkins has warm, natural tones. The Upside Down has cold blues and sickly greens. Vecna's Mindscape has blood reds and shadow blacks. These colour choices aren't just aesthetic, they're storytelling tools that help viewers track where they are, spatially and emotionally, without needing explicit exposition. The aspect ratio choices are also deliberate. Volume 1 uses a wider aspect ratio than earlier seasons, giving it a more cinematic feel. This wider frame allows for more complex compositions, more information in each shot, and a sense of epic scale. The trade-off is that it doesn't fill television screens as completely, but streaming on larger screens and theatrical presentations make the cinematic ratio appropriate. The lighting design varies dramatically between locations. Normal Hawkins is lit naturalistically, with practical sources and motivated lighting. The Upside Down uses more theatrical lighting, with motivated sources being less important than creating mood and atmosphere. Vecna's Lair uses dramatic contrast lighting, deep shadows, and harsh highlights that create a horror movie aesthetic. The visual effects team faces unique challenges with Stranger Things. They need to create effects that look realistic enough to be frightening, but also maintain the slightly heightened sci-fi horror aesthetic that the show has established. Everything needs to feel like it belongs in the same universe, maintaining visual continuity across seasons while also allowing for evolution and new elements. The post-production process is extensive. Colour correction, sound mixing, visual effects integration, music scoring. All of these happen after principal photography wraps. The Duffer Brothers are heavily involved in post-production, making decisions about every aspect of how the final product looks and sounds. This level of creator control is part of why the show feels so cohesive. The release strategy for Season 5 is also worth discussing. Splitting it into volumes creates sustained engagement rather than a single burst of viewing. It allows Netflix to spread out the marketing and keep Stranger Things in public consciousness for a longer period. It also gives viewers time to process and discuss each volume before the next arrives, creating more sustained conversation rather than a quick flurry of discussion that dies down after a week or two. The technical achievement of Volume 1 can't be overstated. Creating this level of quality across 4 feature-length episodes requires coordination among hundreds of people: cast, crew, effects artists, musicians, editors, designers. The fact that it all comes together into a cohesive whole that serves the story is a testament to excellent production management and creative vision. As we reach the end of this extensive analysis of Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1's ending, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed and what it all means as we look forward to the remaining volumes. Volume 1 of Season 5 represents Stranger Things at its most ambitious. The scale is larger than ever. Global stakes, complex mythology, extensive character development across a large ensemble cast. The tone is darker than previous seasons, reflecting both the aging of the characters and the severity of the threat they face. The production values are extraordinary, pushing the boundaries of what television can achieve visually and sonically. But what makes Volume 1 truly successful isn't the spectacle or the technical achievement, impressive as those are. It's the emotional core, the relationships and character arcs that have been carefully developed over years of storytelling. We care what happens to these people. We're invested in their survival and their happiness. When Max volunteers to sacrifice herself, when Dr. K chooses to stay in the blast radius, when Eleven pushes her powers to the breaking point, these moments hit hard because we know these characters, we understand what drives them, we feel the weight of their choices. The ending of Volume 1 is masterful because it gives us both closure and anticipation. It concludes the immediate storyline, the assault on Vecna's lair, the interruption of his ritual, while opening up new questions and challenges for the remaining volumes. It's not a cliffhanger in the cheap sense of cutting off mid-action. It's a chapter ending that provides some answers while setting up future conflicts. The themes explored in Volume 1, trauma and recovery, the cost of heroism, the nature of evil, the power of connection, chosen versus imposed suffering, are deep and complex. The show doesn't offer easy answers or simple morals. It presents difficult situations and lets characters navigate them as best they can, sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing, always struggling with consequences and complications. What's remarkable about Stranger Things is how it's managed to evolve while staying true to its core identity. Season 1 was a smaller, more intimate story about kids searching for their missing friend. Season 5 is an epic confrontation with interdimensional evil that threatens all of reality. These are wildly different scopes, yet the show feels continuous, like a natural progression rather than a sudden shift. The growth has been organic, earned, believable. The characters have grown too. Mike, Will, Lucas, Dustin, Eleven, Max. They started as kids and they're now young adults facing adult challenges and making adult choices. Their maturation hasn't been rushed or artificial. We've watched them learn and change gradually, season by season. The actors have grown up alongside their characters, bringing authenticity to the performances that couldn't be achieved any other way. The adult characters, Joyce, Hopper, Nancy, Steve, Jonathan, Robin, have also developed significantly. They're not static supporting players. They have their own arcs, their own struggles, their own growth. The show respects that adults are people too, with complex inner lives and meaningful stories to tell. As we await Volume 2 and the series finale, there's a mix of excitement and sadness in the fan community. Excitement to see how it all ends, to get answers to long-standing questions, to witness the final confrontation between our heroes and the Upside Down. Sadness because this is truly the end, because we'll be saying goodbye to characters and a world that have meant so much to so many people. The legacy of Stranger Things is already secure. It's influenced popular culture, revitalized interest in 80s nostalgia, demonstrated that genre television can be both artistically ambitious and massively popular, launched the careers of its young cast, created a devoted and creative fan community, and told a story that resonated across generations and cultures. Whatever happens in the remaining volumes, the show has already succeeded in becoming one of the defining series of its era. But the ending matters. A bad ending can diminish what came before, can leave fans feeling betrayed or disappointed. A good ending can elevate the entire series, can provide closure and catharsis that makes the whole journey feel worthwhile. The Duffer Brothers have the weight of expectations on their shoulders, but they also have the benefit of having planned this story from the beginning, knowing where they want to go and how to get there. Volume 1's ending suggests they're on the right track. It's emotionally resonant, thematically rich, technically accomplished, and narratively compelling. If the remaining volumes maintain this level of quality and bring the story to a conclusion that feels both surprising and inevitable, earned and satisfying, then Stranger Things will be remembered, not just as a popular show, but as a great one, a complete artistic statement that told the story it set out to tell. For those of you who've watched this entire analysis, whether you stayed awake through all of it or drifted off and woke back up at various points, thank you. Thank you for caring about these characters and this story enough to want to understand them more deeply. Thank you for being part of the Stranger Things community, for engaging with the show thoughtfully and passionately. As we wait for Volume 2, let's appreciate what we've been given in Volume 1. Let's rewatch our favourite moments, discuss our theories with friends and online communities, create art and stories inspired by the show. Let's keep these characters alive in our conversations and imaginations. Let's be grateful that we got to experience this story as it unfolded, that we were part of the cultural moment that Stranger Things created. The Upside Down is still there. The rift remains open. Vecna lives and will return stronger. Our heroes are wounded but not defeated, separated but not broken, afraid but not hopeless. They'll fight again. They'll face the darkness again, and we'll be there with them, watching their journey conclude, hoping for the best, prepared for whatever comes. Until Volume 2 arrives, keep watching, keep discussing, keep caring. These stories matter because we decide they matter, because we invest our time and attention and emotion in them. Stranger Things has been worth that investment, has earned our engagement and affection through years of quality storytelling. So rest well, dream well, and know that when you wake, when Volume 2 finally arrives, we'll return to Hawkins together. We'll stand with Eleven, Mike, Will, Lucas, Dustin, Max, Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Robin, Joyce and Hopper. We'll face the final battle. We'll see how it all ends. And whatever that ending is, we'll have experienced it together, as a community bound by our shared love of this strange, wonderful, terrifying, heartfelt story. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Stay strange, stay brave, and remember, friends don't lie, but sometimes the truth is more complicated than we expect, and that's okay. Real life, real stories, real people. They're messy and complicated and beautiful because of that complexity, not despite it. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, whenever you're watching this. May your dreams be peaceful, may your theories prove interesting, and may Volume 2 exceed all our hopes and expectations. This is the end of our deep dive into Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1. Until next time, in the words of a show that understands the power of those 3 simple words, I love you. And we love this show, these characters, this community. Sleep well, friends. The Upside Down can wait until tomorrow.